Well, welcome everyone to the Verify group conversation. Give everyone some time to go through the slides and add questions in the doc. If there's any links missing or if anyone's having trouble with any of the links, just let me know and I'll post anything you need in the chat.
Elliot, I posted a question in the doc. Is it okay to speak up?
Yeah, absolutely. Is your question the one around the transitional complexity versus permanent complexity?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I'm just reading through the issue and kind of reminding myself of what's going on in there. I don't see I can't think of a good reason can't think of a good reason to avoid the transitional complexity, and if it means avoiding the permanent complexity. So for those, if anyone's not read through that issue or not thought about kind of the point that Sid's bringing up, it's a proposed way of going forward is kind of blocked by some of the current language or current reserved keywords for the GitLab CI file. And so the transition complexity would be maybe putting us into a state of a few months or a few releases where we have a temporary state or some temporary words or some temporary a temporarily valid schema for your CI file that is then deprecated. So it's like a short iterative approach to moving forward. So I think that's the right I think that's the right way to do it, as opposed to like maintaining the baggage long term. Yeah, I don't have a good I don't have a good reason not to agree with that.
Yeah, and I've seen this a few times where we've ended up with pretty ugly URLs and things like that because we were like, oh, we didn't reserve that thing, and then we did the shortest thing, but it's gonna for the next 20 years. That means the things are not going to be as the way they should be.
Yeah, and I think I know we want to be careful with the things that we deprecate in a minor release, but I do think we've got that functionality built into how we're looking at releases with the major releases, but also, we do from time to time deprecate things mid-major, I guess, in the minor releases. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah, maybe sometimes what we can do is like ship the functionality and ship it in the ugly way, but also put a deprecation notice in, make an issue. The next major release, the deprecation becomes real, and we switch to the preferred state.
Totally. I think that really gets to the core of the iteration value too. Not just that we're iterating the functionality, but we're iterating saying like, hey, the way we thought this through the first time, after we learned about how it's being used and like how we can build on it, we need to kind of tweak that a bit too, and change it a bit. So I completely agree.
Yeah, and in cases like this, it's already clear what the preferred way is. We just can't go there. So we're going to ship the value to customers, get it done, provide the value, and then we have a kind of a cleanup task that is, it's almost it's not technical debt as much as user interface debt or URL debt, where you want to change that. Someone's going to correct me and say URI debt, something like that. Can we maybe talk through a bit what the vision is for integrating Vault with GitLab? I saw the issue, but I'd love a verbal explanation.
Sure, Brendan, you want to?
Sure. Yeah, I can talk about that. So there's a few things. We've pushed this back a release than we wanted to do, but we're going to be doing a proof of concept first. So today it's possible to integrate Vault with GitLab the same way that Vault integrates with Jenkins, which is through an auth method that they call app roll. It's basically a single factor server to server auth, which you could do today with a GitLab runner, but we don't want that to be the only way to do it. So we're looking at integrating TLS authentication directly into the runner, so that the runner can receive like a temporary key from Vault, do its deploy task or whatever other task it has, and then that key expires after a certain period of time, 10 minutes, let's say. So that's what we're working on currently. And then I think that from that, we'll learn more about how we might be able to then there's also a migrating to Vault Epic that comes after that. That was mostly a Sid idea, so I'm explaining his idea to him. But the idea that secrets management in general in GitLab, forget just verify, but throughout the application is something that we should consider. Is Vault a better solution than trying to iterate on our own secrets and keys that we use within the application? And so that is kind of where we're headed, but we're at the very beginning of it. So hopefully that answered the question, Sid.
Yeah, is there something that is clear as a vision for that? Because if I look at this, it seems to be a bit out of date. It doesn't distinguish between kind of environmental variables and secret variables. We discussed that maybe all secret variables should be involved, but I don't see that in here. Is there better articulation of the vision, or is this out of date and should it be updated?
There should be. There's actually an epic above that. I'll find some links and put them in the document.
And what is the idea there? Is the idea to move all secret variables to Vault, or is it unclear?
It's not. We haven't made that decision yet. No. I think we wanted to go through the proof of concept before we decided to do that. I think it's very likely outcome that we would consider that, right? Because, for instance, we just shipped this what we called simple masking of variables, right? Which is a very simplistic way of not really protecting the variables, but still something customers wanted to mask them in the build logs. Whereas again, the more mature way of handling that would be to have variables that are immutable and secrets that are immutable and go away. So I think that we will probably eventually say that is the recommended method, but I want to have a better understanding of how tight of an integration we're going to be able to achieve before we decide, hey, let's scrap our variables completely for it.
Yeah, it makes sense to iterate. What I don't understand is, like, I see issues like this. It's to install HashiCorp Vault onto the cluster that's attached to GitLab, instead of like the cluster or omnibus that GitLab is running in. So this would mean, for example, for GitLab.com, we have thousands and thousands of people attaching clusters. So we would be running thousands and thousands copies of Vault. I thought that the idea was that Vault would become part of GitLab and it would be managed next to the GitLab installation. So there would be, for GitLab.com, there would be one Vault installation with all the secrets, because GitLab environmental variables, environmental secrets are handled in GitLab, not in the. It's not a deploy target. It's the essence of the application. Like, we have a single database for GitLab.com, etc. How should I see that?
Yeah, so that is a separate idea that came out in discussion with the team and isn't scheduled yet. I'm going to find you the better link for the migration, right? So again, our team is separating the concept of integration and migration here, where I don't know if those are the correct words, but where integration is the ability for those customers who already have Vault to utilize their Vault with GitLab. And then migration is what you were just talking about, which is ship Vault with GitLab such that everyone can take advantage of it. And I'm going to find that as well. But right now, those are two different things. So we're working first on the integration, and then the migration would involve many groups, including Verify. And so we would end up probably being the experts that would help drive that, because we're doing this integration work. but there is a separate vision. That issue that you just had relates to it and isn't necessarily the direction we want to go. And so I'm going to find the epic that talks about the migration that I think is more in line with what you were discussing. Does that make sense? I'm just trying to find it too as I'm talking. But
that makes sense in a like the verbal way you explain it. However, from reading this issue, I couldn't get that context, and I would think that looking at the issues, our company strategy is to treat Vault like we treat a Prometheus or something, which we expect to be set up on the deployment target. This isn't screaming at me, hey, Vault's going to be an essential part of GitLab, or there's 2 alternative routes and we're going to pick one of them.
Sure. Yeah, I'm going to update that because I think that those focusing on those 2 silos that I mentioned has thus then made it confusing for you to see the overall thing, right? Like you said. So I'm going to update the original issue, which is super popular, right, and has a lot of input, with links to the 2 epics and discussion about the migration integration strategy.
Cool.
I'll take that as a takeaway.
Thanks for that. How do we? I saw that we're making progress towards like a Windows executor for the Docker containers. How's that going? And then, maybe also, is this related to like running iOS builds in Docker? Like, is that also a direction we're going in? But maybe start with the road to Windows testing.
The road to Windows is, I'm sure there'll be some lessons we can take away and apply to things like iOS, but they're very independent. Most of the challenges that have been coming up with the Windows executor are more Windows systems based sorts of lessons and gotchas and things that have come up. The kind of the biggest example of something that has come up and has been a bit of a challenge is just the way that things are different when you're running Windows Docker inside Windows. And so in that case, the 2 versions of Windows, the host and the client, is that the right terminology? I think it is. The host and the client need to be running the same version of Windows exactly, which is a very different sort of ecosystem than we're used to if you're running Docker with things like Linux. So there's little things like that that have kind of come up and have been changed the plan along the way. So we're getting there and we're making steady progress on it, but there are some surprises that come up.
And what's the idea? When are we happy with like the state of using Windows and Docker in GitLab?
Hopefully this release. It was scheduled for, I think, maybe even 2 releases ago, but there's enough things that have come up, both within that project and kind of external that have taken time away that have slowed it down.
Cool. And I'm not super aware of this, but I hear that the industry is working on making sure you can build iOS application on Linux, which would make it much more convenient and much cheaper to run them. Is someone aware of that?
I'm certainly not. This is the first I'm hearing of it.
Yeah, I'm aware of it. We haven't done any discovery around it yet, but we are going to do discovery around it. I know that, Jason did a lot of great work in the first quarter around Fastlane and builds for iOS and Android around that. But there is a growing push kind of away from that and towards this new way to build iOS on Linux. And so I don't know a lot about it. I just know that it exists. And I intend to spend some product manager time learning a lot more about it.
If that's an official push from Apple that's doing that?
I don't think
it's more
so.
community driven. Yeah, I think it's more community driven towards, as lots of folks that are building iOS are dealing with scale issues. It's something that there's a big community around.
I linked the thing, and it's for people Googling or for people listening, it's called cross-compiling for iOS on Linux. And Godot is big on this.
Thanks for sharing that, Sid.
Welcome. I'm going to verbalize Marcus' comment. Are we on track to deliver our Q1 OKR, specifically new minimal categories and minimum to viable categories, and more broadly on our fiscal year 20 maturity goals?
So the answer to that is in the slides as well, but the answer is no. We're not on track for that. New categories, based on some of the challenges Elliot was mentioning, that slipped. That actually is going to ship just after this fiscal quarter, so we won't make the OKR, but it will ship. New to viable is lagging a little further behind that. So yeah, Sid, you're asking what percentage? I believe so. So the new categories in general for the product team, right, of which Verify owns one part of, is currently tracking towards 33% achievement. And you can actually link these links here, go to the details. And then the new to viable is final at 36%. But the Verify group owns performance testing in new to viable and usability testing in new categories. And so those are things that are not shipping, and part of that what's missing that OKR.
So it seems that we're not trending towards our like calendar year goals, which is like, they were super ambitious. I don't mind, but we're not giving that signal on our homepage right now because we say coming in 2019. Mm-hmm. Also, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's actually something that Jason's the as you know, been promoted to director for CI/CD. And it's not entirely obvious from the slides, but I'm going to paste it in again here. It's called CI/CD category refresh in the slides. So Jason is working with Mark on a merge request to more accurately state the changes that are happening here, and what hard decisions we're making about the ambitious plan and changes to it. So we would love feedback on that. And then I think that merge request will help us communicate better to the outside world that, hey, like, we're off track and this is the new plan. And so that covers all of the kind of CI/CD stages, which are verify, package, and release from our 10 stages.
Cool. This is not the best forum, but I propose that we change coming in 2019 to just roadmap or on our roadmap or something like that, where we're pretty explicit that this is not here yet. And maybe even we should have a dividing line between them to make sure that they're that it's visually clear, but dividing lines are hard. So let's make the simplest change.
Sure. Well, I will also, like you said, it's not necessarily a verified thing, but I can make sure that happens. So we'll work on that.
I'll take it to the product channel. What are you hearing from customers, Brandon? What are
Sure, yeah.
customers wanting? Because I was there's a quote on the slide number 3. A lot of times people don't know what they want until you show it to them, which can be true, but also we're, as a company, I think we have to now get back a bit more to listening to customers and don't necessarily make what they ask for, but make sure we solve their problem.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that's a balance that we're trying really hard to achieve, right? Especially in Verify, right? We have a lovable category in CI, but one that we need to maintain that leadership with, while of course also shipping towards the breadth vision. So thanks, Sid. Yeah, I came back. Mark's voice may be lost from the great time we had together in New York with our customers. The customer advisory board meeting was put together by product marketing. That I kept saying I had very high expectations for, and I wanted to temper my expectations. But I think even my high expectations were exceeded. It was great. So a lot of our enterprise customers talking about the ability to control more what their users are doing within Verify. And it's not necessarily a GitLab anti-pattern, but it's a little different than an open source model where we want to empower the developers. And of course, we know we want to live that and empower people to be able to ship to production quickly. And then a lot of our customers are on board with that, but they might be a bank that's regulated that needs to have, an auditable piece of information in their pipeline. And so this required CI elements that's coming in 12.0 is a direct reflection of that, right? That is something that both we think people want and people are saying we want. Like, it was basically the only thing that anyone wanted to talk to me about the CAD at the CAB until I said, look, it's scheduled, we're going to do it. And then we got to talk about fun new stuff. But I think that's a direct reflection of listening to the voice of the customer. Whereas, some of the other things, that you can read about on the direction page, or, the things that we want to do to expand the categories are more of the slide 3. So we're trying to balance both, right? And we're working as the whole product org is to balance those two things.
What were some of the new exciting things they said after that?
So I had a lot of folks interested in, I talked about a couple of things that Jason and I have been talking about. So the idea of progressive delivery. And if anyone doesn't know what that is, I'd recommend reading the CI/CD vision page. And so this idea of even moving past continuous delivery to what some in the industry are calling progressive delivery. And Jason wrote a lot of great stuff about that. So some of our largest customers, have these teams that are pushing the boundaries of how fast can they ship into production and how well can they do continuous delivery even in a regulated environment. And so while they may have many teams that they're still kind of bringing along and bringing into DevOps even, or they have some teams that are really pushing the boundaries. So this kind of spectrum of customers that we see of maturity along the DevOps lifecycle and their DevOps maturity, that same spectrum exists then within many of our customers too. So that was an interesting thing to discuss with folks. And of course, the folks that are there and invested in GitLab and showing up are helping to lead those teams that are kind of on the cutting edge. But they want to make sure that we provide tools and ways to help them get the rest of their teams kind of on board. So that was pretty interesting.
Elliot, we're at 25 minutes, so please consider wrapping up the call.
All right. I guess we just everyone's starting to drop off, so let's do it. Let's wrap it up. Give people a couple minutes before the company call. Thanks everyone for the questions and comments and reading through the slides. If you have any other questions or comments afterwards, we are in the G_verify channel, and feel free to jump in there and ask us anything. Have a great day.